Kevin Listen.
And I'm Joshua Crocker.
And this is Kicking for a Living,
a podcast about martial arts and business from two martial arts instructors.
Well, I'm excited, and I was excited last time. We have our second guest on. This is Bridgette, my lovely wife, and your amazing mom. Also, the person in charge of our memberships and program lead, and so we wanted to bring her on to kind of talk about memberships and students and things like that. So I'm really excited. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Excited to be on the podcast.
Do you have anything else you want to say before we kind of get into the topic of the episode?
Me?
Yes, you.
I've always loved being a part of what we do here in our martial arts school, and I'm excited to share more information about what I think can be one of the biggest challenges we tend to face.
Yeah, that challenge kind of being student retention. Essentially, maybe reasons why a student or a kid might want to or have to leave a school. And it's always sad as a martial arts instructor whenever a student has to leave. You know, obviously we don't want any students to go, but it's part of life. Things happen, things come up, and you're really kind of the expert in dealing with that because you deal with a lot of not just the students, but their parents and the people that kind of pay for them to come or maybe drive them here. And so we wanted to get just some insight and thoughts on kind of how that works for you and kind of your opinion on things and how you deal with some of that. So, because I know how we deal with it on the mats is very different from how it happens off the mats.
We're going to start today with a question we hear a lot. Well, it's not really a question, but a statement we hear a lot is, my kid doesn't want to go. My kid doesn't want to come to class anymore. My kid's been having trouble, getting ready for class and wanting to go. And how we as instructors deal with that, how as parents or martial arts instructors at, your own dojo, if you're, own a martial arts school, how you can deal with that solution. And the first thing is, you've got to know who your students are. You've got to know who you want in your dojo as part of that training group, as on the mats. Because if you have people on the mats who don't want to be there to begin with, it's going to be a lot harder to keep up that retention. So how about we start by talking about our kind of target market and what to look for in that.
Yeah, when we developed some ideas about who our ideal student was, it really helped us narrow that framework in a way that allowed us to upfront set the expectations and to pre-frame what we wanted to see our students get out of their training. And so, we developed some tools to help us really stay focused on finding the right people to be a part of our community here. Between having a core focus and having very specific parameters that maybe we set out in the way that I talk to new families, whether they've visited our website, whether they call the school. We want to make sure that people understand up front that they're looking for something out of us, but we're also looking for something out of them because they can pay to join our facility and be members here, but that doesn't mean that that's the end of the expectations for what they will put into their training.
And I think that a lot of that is, a lot of schools, especially schools that I've been in and talking to other martial arts instructors and owners, they want anyone, but there are some people that maybe are not cut out for the type of school that you run. Whether if you're a highly competitive school, you want competitors. If you're a highly self-defense school, if you cater more towards kids, if you cater towards adults. And I think that kind of gets lost in translation a lot. So having that target market, I know it's helped us. And I think that that's a really powerful thing because you kind of get to talk to people and say, is this right for you? Is this the right choice for you or your family?
And I've developed a tool that we'll talk a little bit more about later in the podcast that I am really excited to have started using because I really feel like it helps set those expectations up front.
One thing, though, you just have to accept in, the martial arts industry is that not everyone is going to earn a black belt. And as an instructor, you have to realize not every student who walks on the mat is going to make it to black belt. And that's not always what they need. That's not always why they're on the mat, is just to get to black belt. And that's okay. There's many different, values you can take away from martial arts. Likewise, as a student, you have to realize that if you want to make it all the way to black belt, it has to be commitment, it has to be a priority, because most people don't make it there. And you also have to realize there's more you're going to get out of it than just earning a black belt. It's a cool thing at the end of the day, but that's not why you're on the mats. There's other values you get from your training. So you have to really look at what is the reason I'm out here. We talked about that back in season 1. What is your why for doing martial arts? If you haven't checked out that episode yet, I'd highly recommend going back and listening to it. Dives a bit deeper into, I think who we want in our target market. We kind of talk a bit more from a different perspective on that, kind of talk about why we got into martial arts. But if you're looking into getting into martial arts and something you want to stick with, you have to know why you're out there to begin with.
Less than 2% actually get to black belt.
So then what are there acceptable reasons for not going to class, for having to quit martial arts?
I do think that there are some acceptable reasons. There are reasons that, life throws at us that are oftentimes unavoidable. I think some of those would be moving. I can't help it if someone leaves the state and goes somewhere else. Jobs take us other places. Education might take us into different places. But I will warn you, especially for us, we follow people when they leave us. So some of my greatest friends have been a part of our facility and have left, and we stay in contact because, I'm sure it's been said before, but we feel like our students are like family to us. And so it's hard when students move. But I know that you guys look for opportunities for students to train when they leave our school.
I would be curious, and maybe if you own a martial arts school, leave us a comment, but I feel like we have a lot of students that percentage-wise, when they move, keep in contact or come back or train or hey, I'm going to be down for the weekend, let me come visit. And I'd be really curious to know if that's an us thing or if that's kind of I'd like to say it's the norm among martial arts schools. So if you are a martial arts school owner, give us a comment on that. Give us some feedback. Do you have students that move that you still keep in regular contact with? I know we do.
One thing we're about to experience right now, it's graduation season as we're recording this, and you bring up, education. We have 3 of our longtime students who have been with us since we opened, graduating high school right now. So it's crazy to see that the dojo's been open long enough that students who were with us from the beginning are graduating.
Yeah, thanks for making me feel old.
Several of them.
I hadn't really put it into quite that perspective, so thanks.
Yeah.
Another reason that I think can oftentimes be acceptable, but also at times maybe be solvable, are financial reasons. We try to be very clear up front what to expect out of paying to be here. And it's not just monthly fees. The monthly fees are what allow my instructors to be on the mats every day and to train the students who come in. But at the end of the day, there are other things that are needed and necessary in order to keep progressing in martial arts. And so I always try to make that really clear to parents up front. But then life can happen sometimes. I know sometimes job situations change, and we have set up what we call our scholarship fund, and we use certain special events that we host as a way to kind of put money aside so that when we have students who have been with us for a long time end up in these financial situations, we're able to cover the cost of their training for a couple of months while parents might get back on their feet or while they get back on their feet. And so that's something for us where we're able to adapt for at least a period of time while changes are happening. But being clear up front about the expectations of cost is something that is important to me so that we don't run into those roadblocks in the future.
Right, and I know that we've had some students that, especially during like COVID or, whenever we've had things where someone might lose their job, they don't want to quit, or their kid doesn't want to quit. And so I know that we've helped them out in those situations using that scholarship fund as well, because we can't, obviously, people can't give everything away for free because we all have to eat as well. Other people deserve to have the right to have a place to live and eat. But at the same time, we understand that situations come up. I know I've been there in tough financial situations. But I also understand that's something that sometimes is out of our control, and that can make it very difficult. I know you deal with the parents, but that can also reflect on the students. If they are the student themselves as an adult, or the kid, it can be really hard on them to focus their training when it's so hard at home.
And as martial arts instructors, and most of the ones I've met, we're not in it to make a lot of money. It's not something that we're going to walk away, rich from. And I say that as first, as an instructor, you got to realize you got to love what you do, but also as a student, as someone who goes to a martial arts school, realize that at least, a good school, they're not there just to take your money. There's a reason why, they do these things. It's for your training. They're trying to give you these experiences, and the people who work tirelessly behind the scenes and on the mats teach you, to keep the business going, because at the end of the day, you have to realize it's a business. And I've seen and heard stories from a lot of martial arts instructors who forget the business side. They're so into just teaching that they end up either closing, or they can never really grow their school because they don't have the finances to do it. So on both the student end and the business end, it's important to know that money is what at least keeps the opportunities going for both of us.
And then I think an acceptable reason oftentimes is illness or injury. There are a lot of people who can be gone for a month or two and still be able to come back on the mats and get back in it. But I'll tell you, our kids are something else, because they have really proven, especially this year, we have a lot of teenagers who have made some poor decisions in this year. And I say that in jest, because sometimes it's really not their fault, but we've had a couple of broken bones in the last couple of months, and those kids were still showing up for classes. They took the 2 weeks that their doctor was like, you need to not move, and they didn't, but then they came back, and they just wore their casts or their boots to classes, because let me just also say it wasn't something that happened here.
I was going to clarify that.
But, when we get injured, there are ways to adjust in those moments. But sometimes long-term illnesses. I know we had a family this season who they had black mold in their house, and they had to have that cleared out, and they were really sick for a really long time, and they did everything they could to still be here and to still get that experience of training. But in the long run, we don't want students to have to leave because of illness or injury, and we will make adjustments in those situations the best that we can. And we hope that that's a reflection of what you want to get out of your training as well.
And I would say, and I have talked to other instructors that agree, it's very easy if you have injury or an illness, injury specifically, to just be like, oh, I'm just going to not come in. But then that starts getting rid of that habit. And so they'll say, hey, look, it's better for you to come in and just watch a class, or kind of be on the side, or work with this other instructor and just kind of do what you can, do something light, just to keep that habit going. Because when you fall out of habit, that's usually when that injury starts seeing that student leave. Is they're no longer habit, and then when they're better, they're like, do I want to go back? It always puts that little question in their head. But if you just keep that momentum going, I think that helps. And I think it helps in the long run, because it shows you just what you can do, even when you maybe have an injury or something come up like that.
So, there are reasons to not be on the mats. And the ones we're talking about are things that are often out of control, things that typically people didn't expect or ask for, when it comes to injuries, financial issues. Moving just, to somewhere new can put you too far away to keep training. But there are other reasons I think that are different than those, where there are more issues that come up that can be solved. And that especially when you're younger, you'll hear kids say it a lot, but even as adults, as we're busy with life, it can be easy to let excuses come up. So what are some of the solvable reasons, some of the solutions we can find for reasons people don't want to be on the mats?
So, one of the things I hear a lot is we're just too busy. And this is absolutely a time in life where we can be overcommitted. I will tell you, I have one kid graduating elementary school, one kid graduating high school, and I have felt overwhelmed for the last few weeks. The times in our life where that is an issue can be very difficult because as parents especially, it's our job to make sure our kids get to the places that they need to be. And so one of the ways we as a school have tried to help solve that problem from day one is that we offer a very flexible schedule. We allow our students to choose which classes that they come to each week. We recommend a certain amount of classes that they have to attend, but give them more options than what they are required to be here for. And because of that, it allows parents to see a bit more flexibility in their own schedule. Oh, well, we missed today, but that's okay. We have a class we can get to tomorrow. I try to make sure that they really understand that that's one of the benefits that we offer is that, saying, well, I can't come today means I can come tomorrow. But also just trying to make sure that we allow for that flexibility in our daily lives. And so I think schedule is definitely something that can be taken seriously on the forefront at home. Am I able to get my kiddo to class every week? So that's one thing. Overcommitted outside of training time is very easy to solve when you have a flexible schedule.
And I think that the schedule, because you said, we live in a time where a lot of kids are overbooked. And I think that is a part of the reason, to go back to what we said earlier, why so many people don't make it to black belt. And that is because to make it to black belt, you have to dedicate. It's the difference between doing a sport casually to try it out versus, no, this is my thing. This is what I do. And that doesn't necessarily have to happen day one. That's why there's ranks. That's why we have class structures. But over time, people, they kind of have to decide for themselves, is this your thing? Because you're not going to get a black belt and do soccer and do baseball. Like that's not very feasible. If you're at a school that allows that, anyway, different topic. But really, you have to dedicate that time to it.
Well, and Joshua, you've created some very specific ways that students can see that progress so that they can know, hey, this is paying off for me. With our attendance cards and with our poster that explains how many classes it takes to get to belts. And, do you feel like that has helped in solving some of those issues of, well, I've already been to class this week?
I think it helps set the expectation for the student. And one thing we'll talk about kind of, again, later in the podcast, that tool you've been working on, is just make sure the communication and transparency between, the students and the instructor and the parents is there. Because if they don't know when they're going to be getting their next rank, they don't have those goals, it's something that's hard to commit to. We all need goals to keep us motivated. It's something we've talked about kind of behind the scenes as black belts, is what are our goals? Because when we don't set those for ourselves, it's hard to dedicate the time for us to keep our training. So we need to sit down. We need to be like, hey, here's the tangible things I want to get better at. Here's how I'm going to do it so I can get that next rank, so I can continue my training. And when it comes to attendance cards and just those numbers, it gives you a clearer expectation of this is how long you need to be here for. These are the things you need to know in order to rank up. So it keeps you on the right track and you don't wander too much away from that path.
I think the next probably most The thing I get in emails or text messages the most is, well, my child's just not interested. Number one, you were interested the day you signed up. That was something that at one time really jived with being here. Smiles all around after our first class and feeling really good. But I think what happens is, especially when we have that overcommitted schedule, I will tell you, I am someone who, especially when I've been really busy the last few weeks, I've just wanted to do nothing for even a few minutes. I find myself sitting in my car for 15 minutes before going into a grocery store because the thought of actually getting out of my car, walking in, and then putting food in my cart is overwhelming sometimes. And our kids can feel that way too, especially as they're wrapping up their school years. But I really, really think that taking a hard look at what you do before coming to classes, this is where it's solvable. Is your child allowed to be on a screen before they come to classes? Are they, asking to do something else that's not really a productive activity? Is it something that is going to keep them motivated in their day-to-day lives? And it's not always about what's easy. The parents will tell me, well, my kid just doesn't feel challenged, and so they're bored. But then if I ask that same parent or that same student, hey, show me a round kick, show me a side kick, and they can't do it, they're not bored. They're not retaining the information because they're not focused when they're in that class. And so I think that a lot of times when we hear my child's not interested, this is kind of harder than I expected it to be. And we as parents have to really step up and say, yeah, it's a great challenge for you because you're learning some really amazing things with it.
And this brings up that, I'm glad you said that, because you said, you'll have a student and they'll say they're not challenged or they're bored or they already know this. And of course, Joshua and I know this too, that a student will tell us, oh, I think the kids use the term, I've mastered that. And then we'll say, okay, show me. And then of course, they can't do it. And I think that this is, like you said, they're unfocused, or they would rather have been doing something else. Like you said, screen time, because I'll ask them, oh, I didn't want to come to class. Well, what were you doing before class? Playing a video game? Well, of course. Why? When a parent comes in and says, stop playing a video game and get ready for class, they don't want to do that. That makes sense. I wouldn't want to do that. If I'm doing one thing that's fun and then I have to stop doing something I enjoy to go do something else, that's hard. But I think you have a clever solution for this that I love, and I don't know if we're jumping ahead, but I want to hear the solution.
So one of the things that I feel can help curb this particular thing is making wise choices about what we do before we come to class. If you tell your kid, go clean the toilet before we come to class, they're more likely to want to walk away from that than they are, a video game. And so finding something where it's, hey, you need to get this thing done and then we'll go to class. Well, they're gonna power through that thing and want to go to class because they're going to enjoy class more than they are doing a chore. No one is ever disappointed when they show up to class. Kids walk away with smiles all the time. Adults who come in who are like, man, I was just so busy at work today. And then they get that good workout. I mean, this is just science. That when we come in and we work out, we have all of those happy hormones go through our bodies that allow us to walk off the mat feeling refreshed. And so I really do think that, especially after 2020, when we went through a COVID season of falling into these habits of being able to say no, of having permission to say no to things, that has become the normal for us. And we really have a lot of backing out to do. And I'm reading a book right now too that is it's called The Anxious Generation. And it is it's taking what has come out of the last 4 years and showing how our kids' brains have really been rewired because of what we have been able to provide them as far as screen time. And it really makes doing activity difficult at times. And so I'll visit with you guys more about that maybe in a future podcast when I've had the chance to really deep dive that information more.
And Joshua, would you agree that a lot of times that a student says that they're bored or they're uninterested, it is because they just rather be playing a game or be on their screen? I feel like I see that a lot.
The students who are bored in class are the students who are not trying in class. And it's very, very clear. I've rarely seen a student say they're bored when they're doing well. And because when you are doing your best and you're trying hard, we give you the next piece. We can't give you the next piece on the move until you've shown you can do the basic move. So if you want to continue training and get better, you have to be dedicated and try your best. As even in my teaching, I noticed a switch at one point when sometimes I felt, I won't say bored, but it was hard to get motivated just to be on the mats teaching all the time, is when I was able to engage more and just, be out there more, participating more, trying harder myself. It became much less an issue for me to stay concentrated on what I was doing. Because I've had some of those same things where it's hard to get that habit, hard to always want to, be at work every day. It's not always something we want to do. But I find that setting a routine and, like you said, chores before class is great. Whenever, just every day for me, something that helps is I try to get the important chores done in the morning or on the weekend before I kind of relax. And then I do that thing that, I sit on the couch, watch TV, play my phone, read a book, whatever. But I do those productive things first because once those are out of the way, you can enjoy those other things more. Once you get in one mindset, it's hard to switch to another. So you have to be able to know which mindset are you in. Are you in relax, have fun? Are you in try hard and work? Are you get chores done mode? You have to be able to switch between those, and that's how you can be more productive. And that's something that's helped me a lot, is be able to set those specific times to do these things. And it makes even mundane things and challenging things still interesting and still engaging and fun, that, I don't really feel bored as much when I have that mindset.
Well, and I think that really plays into my next point, about discipline and commitment, because as parents, our job is to raise respectful, responsible kids. That is what we are tasked with when we have kids. But even as adults, those are things we have to have. We have to have discipline and commitment. And so I think, and I know you guys have done a previous podcast where we kind of talked about misconceptions of what we provide in the martial arts. Mm-hmm. And we do not teach children discipline. That is not one of our goals. Now, do we reinforce what discipline is? Do we help them have a tool for practicing discipline and those habits? Absolutely. Because those skills are not only here on the mats. One of the things I tell kids when they walk in the door, and adults especially, and this was something that I've picked up from another instructor years ago, was the idea that when you bow and you go on the mats, you don't have to think about anything else that's going on in life. You don't have to worry about your homework. You don't have to worry about what you're going to eat for dinner. You don't have to worry about that kid who said something nasty to you on the playground today, or that coworker who didn't get their work done, and so now you are behind on things you have to do. Yes, it happens. I'm sorry. It's been a busy couple of weeks. But, you don't have to think about those things when you train. You can just go to class. You can just be on the mats and focus on the instructor in those moments. And I think that is something that requires that discipline, right? We have that opportunity to come in and be focused for that little bit of time. And parents, our job is to model that behavior. Kevin, just last night, what did I tell you? What was too far away?
The shower.
I was sitting in the living room. I had just been working on my computer for a couple of hours. You know, my brain was done. And I looked at him and I was like, it's too far to go take a shower. That's what it feels like for your kids when they go to class sometimes. It's too far. It's too much. And that is just something that we as parents have that opportunity to overcome.
So, and I think that goes to a previous reason that we were talking about as to why a student might want to quit. And that is, you know, a parent will bring their student in, and stop me or correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they'll bring their kid in because they say, I want my kid to learn discipline and focus and respect. Great. That is the parent's goal for signing their kid up into martial arts, is to give them that structure. Then the kid will lose interest because they're not disciplined and they're not showing respect. And then the parent says, well, they don't want to come anymore and I don't want to force them. And now we're left in this kind of conundrum of, well, who's the parent? Do you want your kid to just be here to have fun? Or did you want your kid to have discipline? Because it sounds like you want your kid to have focus and respect and discipline, but you're allowing your kid to call the shots, which means that it's this circle of you want to fix the problem, but you're allowing the problem. Is this accurate? Is this something you see a lot?
I mean, absolutely. And it's the way you just phrased it is a way that my brain had not even really made that connection about, yeah, you come in saying you want these things, but when these things become hard, we just let our kids quit or you quit as an adult. You know, that doesn't really, in the long run, help you develop and keep those as good, healthy habits.
I actually think it was another instructor, Master Chip, that kind of put that in my brain when I was talking to him. You know, that same exact reason. You wanted your kid here for discipline, but then when your kid says, well, they're just not having fun anymore, so we're going to quit. Well, what's the reason? Why are you bringing him? The kid doesn't drive themselves. They're 8, 9, 10 years old. And so sometimes I think it's easy to lose track of that. And I think that we also have to realize that enforcing those habits, it takes time. You know, we see these kids, you know, depending upon the class, 30, 45 minutes, an hour a day, 2, maybe 3 days a week to start. You know, I'm not going to be able to change everything else that happens the rest of those 23 hours in the day.
Yeah, so I think that kind of wraps up some of the ideas that we had with discipline and commitment. And, you know, one of the other things that we see sometimes is not necessarily, I think it was written once as like a fear of failure. I mean, Joshua, we don't have a lot of kids that go through and fail at what they're learning. And I've always considered failure just delayed success.
Mm-hmm. And that's essentially how we look at it. And we are going to be talking a lot more about, you know, promotion and testing soon. I think in our next episode in a couple weeks, we'll be talking a lot about that. But just be able to redefine what that progress is. It goes back to something I said earlier of you have to know what you want out of martial arts. Is it having fun? Is it getting a black belt? Is it discipline? Because you need to know what you want. Because if you are just wandering around aimlessly, you're going to find nothing. It's the same thing, you know, I tell students in a sparring class. If you just start swinging your arms and legs aimlessly, hoping to make contact, you're eventually going to find someone who's going to, you know, kick you around. You need to have a strategy. You need to have a plan. You need to know what you want out of that sparring match. You need to know what you want out of your training, out of any other goals you have, to have that progression, because failure happens a lot more when you don't know what success is yet. You need to know what your success is, because that gives you something to keep working towards. And you're not going to fail at that. It just might take longer. You know, but if you keep driving towards that, you're going to find that eventually.
Well, and that's, you know, our core focus here is to build a community where everyone rises to their potential. It is not, we are here to help expose potential, absolutely. But it is not up to us, ultimately, to determine what someone's potential is. That is something that they have to be able to find, and then we help expose it, and we give them that opportunity to live it out. And so I do think that, that idea that we have a fear of moving forward sometimes simply because we don't really know what forward is certainly something that can hold you back from not understanding the long-term goals.
It's interesting because I've seen both ends of the spectrum, where I've seen a student that the parents think that they should be progressing way faster. But that is honestly more rare than a parent who almost wants their kid to hold off. I didn't think I would see that more, but over time I can think of more situations where we see the potential in this student and we want them to rise, and we see how much progression they've made, and it's the parents that are like, well, I don't know. I don't really know if they're going to be able to handle that next level of class and things of that nature. And it's difficult because we look at a student where they're at based on who they are, their age. We look at that progression and say, look how far they've come. And I think that sometimes parents have an expectation in their head of, oh, my kid should be able to do all these fancy, cool, da-da-da-da moves, otherwise they're simply not good enough. And like you said, we expose a student's potential, and potential is different for every person. The potential of an 8-year-old is not the same as the potential of a 14-year-old. But somewhere in their head, probably because of TV shows and movies, they think that there is, they need to be able to defend an army of ninjas. I only know one student, well, two, that was their goal, that they wanted to fight an army of ninjas off. That's usually not the case, and so I find it interesting that parents and sometimes students are so afraid of that fear of progressing to the next level.
She kind of got to do that a couple weeks ago, by the way, because she got dropped in the woods for 2 days and had to stay alive. I just wanted you to know, our student who at one time wanted to fight an army of ninjas.
An army of ninjas.
The final thing that I have is more for us than it really is for our students, because ultimately we lose students over classroom issues, and that is something that we have to accept as business owners, that there will be times where we might be the ones who made the mistakes that ultimately cost us a student. But for us, it's every single time been a learning experience. It's been an opportunity for us to change something about the way we handle classroom issues, about how we instruct, about behaviors that are happening, or ways to make our dojo a more inviting place for everyone. And, we can't get it right 100% of the times. Parents, you can't get it right 100% of the time. But it's what we do with what comes out of those situations that I think is really important. We had a situation this year where ultimately we had to lose a student because of something that happened at the school, and it was really hard for all of us, that student especially. But it also helped us learn that we need to develop some policies and some curriculum for even parents to be able to understand where our kids are in life a little bit better. And so that's something that is being actively worked on, is an opportunity for parents to even learn more about how we can protect our kids. And I think that's it. I think it's just a matter of sometimes we have to own up to things that maybe we haven't done well, but it means that we can do well for every student that comes after those students.
And I think that even goes into some situations where you may have to lose a student, and I know this has happened to us, because there are just certain things that we have to put hard cutoffs on. We cannot accept this in our school for safety, and that means we have to lose a student. And I think a lot of martial arts school owners find that difficult because, like Joshua said earlier, some of them are struggling to keep students, and so losing one is a huge impact. But that's where, knowing these things, knowing the business, knowing the reasons, developing tools and progressing is going to help so that doesn't happen, or the impact is not going to be nearly as detrimental at that time, because the future impact of having that student or situation and not resolving it immediately, even if it means losing someone, could be more detrimental to the school or to another student. And I think that's hard to accept sometimes.
I wanted to finish by talking about that tool you've been working on developing that really has helped illustrate the relationship between both the parent, the student, and the instructor. So do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. This has been something on my mind for quite some time, and we even got it on paper probably over a year ago, but then making sure that we had it developed in a way where it was useful was something that took some time because of our move last year. So I developed something we call the training triangle. So I just want you to picture a triangle in your head, and at the top of that triangle is the student. And each corner is another adult who's going to help that student or another person. And so for us, it's the student at the top, it's the parents, and it's the instructors. Now, if you're an adult student, obviously we don't have that parent side of it, but that just kind of means that our triangle gets a little bit more lopsided based on how you have to think of your commitment being here. But with the training triangle, each one of those points is someone who has to build the whole. And so when I sit down with a family, when they sign up, I will sit down with them and I talk directly to the kid in these situations. And I say, look, you're not the only person who's going to make training here fun for you. There are other people who will make sure that happens for you. And show them that that's going to take the instructors and their parents to also make sure that they're having a great time here. And so I explained to them that between the student and the instructor, we give our best every time you're here. So what does that mean? You have to give us your best. And then I tell them there are going to be days you don't want to come to class. You are going to get home from school and you're going to be like, man, that was such a long day. Or somebody said something, yucky to you on the playground that day. Or you just really want to sit down and watch YouTube. There are going to be days that happens. But if you show up, you have an amazing time when you're here. That always happens, always. And then I make sure that they understand that their job when they're in class is to listen to the instructors. That's it. 45 minutes. They have to spend 45 minutes paying attention to what's going on the mats and nowhere else. And I really feel like they hear that in a different way than just being told, hey, pay attention when they're in class, right? Because it's coming from someone that's making sure that they understand, look, this is the process here. I explained that between them and their parents, we as the instructors or the staff here, we have to communicate and we have to make sure that they understand that process. And then the other big one is between the students and their parents. And I look right at the parents and I'm like, hey, it's your job to make sure that they get here. And so when they have those days where they're really, really struggling to want to walk out the door, remember, they're going to appreciate it afterwards. So I make sure that they know that getting them to the mats has to be a priority. And then practicing at home. And that's when we also get to have the talk about, hey, sister over here, we're not going to practice on her, right? And we can practice with mom and dad, but with permission. And I kind of give the framework of making sure that they understand that learning martial arts is not going to be about running around and punching and kicking everybody, but that it's a way for us to not only learn how to be safe, but to create those habits, to create that discipline. And so by using this kind of framework, and the parents, they hear this information in a way that helps them remember, okay, yeah, this is for everybody. It's not just about my kiddo and what he's getting out of it, but we have to make sure that we're a team providing this information for the student.
And I love this analogy of that triangle, because I've looked into it, other instructors here, we've done the research. The number one way to help your kids stay on the mat is to get on the mat yourself. It is 90% effective. We look at all of our students, we look at the rate of those that become to black belt, and there is a much heavier percentage of students that have a parent that trained with them make it further. That's the way it works. Those are the numbers. Numbers don't lie.
If I remember the numbers right, I think it's more than 80% of our current black belts train with a parent or relative, or their child. So parent, child, relative.
Right.
That's over 80, and just our advanced students, if you expand the scope, it's still, I think, 60 to 70% train with a relative. So
right.
it's if to get that far, it really helps to have someone else. And even those few who don't have become so close with someone else here that it's like they've got that family at the dojo who helps keep them motivated to be here, helps keep them accountable. You need that family to back you up on your journey, on your martial arts. It's important.
Well, I blame you with almost every family I talk to for this even existing, you know.
I started, then my sister and you started, and then, that was before my brother was even born, but eventually he started, It started as something we did as a family. Or, well, I did it, and then it quickly became something we did as a family.
Right.
And that's what kept us all, training so long, and eventually, half our family works here.
Although we can't train together. We can work. We work together great,
yeah,
but we
I
do
work
not.
great with my mom, but not on the mats. We haven't worked on the mats in a while for reasons. Like we never trained well together. But we still kept each other motivated to be here.
Well, and we
continue our training.
We could still celebrate each other's accomplishments. We just could not engage in those accomplishments together at the same time.
That's all right. I've seen some families that work great together, others who do not like working together. But in both scenarios, they want to be on the mats together.
And yet,
even if they're not directly working together.
I can work with you just fine. Kevin, I don't have any problems training with you. So.
Yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah.
You all both started as students, and then for one to do an instructor role to the other, it does get a little awkward. But, as Joshua said, even some students, we'll have siblings that love to work together, and then we have some siblings that if they're partnered up, we're like, let's split you two. And
sometimes that changes with time. I've seen families that started where they could not be close to each other on the mats, and now they work great together. So
I think ultimately, to wrap this up, having set expectations from the get-go is important. Treating training as something that is going to get you to those goals of having better discipline, having better habits. I also always tell my parents to incentivize being here, not punish. Don't take away martial arts training from your kiddo because they're not making good choices. The whole point is give them something that they find that discipline, they find that respect and balance with, so that they can start making those better choices in all aspects of their life. And developing tools to make sure that framework is exposed to your students. This tool is it's brand new. Joshua just finished the graphics for me a couple of weeks ago, so I've been using it for about the last 2 weeks now, and I can't wait to share it with even our current students and say, hey, let's do a refresh on the expectations of success here. So I don't like losing students. It is very hard anytime someone wants to leave, but I've definitely been able to accept it differently, knowing that we have people who are committed in the ways that we want them to be.
Well, that's awesome. I hope that any listeners got at least a few good nuggets in there, or maybe just something to think about. And if you're a student, great. I hope that helped. If not, and you're listening from outside, I hope that maybe we gave you some good information that maybe even you can use in your own school or help you in your decision of finding a school for you. As always, if you have any questions or anything, leave us comments on there. That way we can get some comments and questions going. We'd love to, we've said it multiple times, do an FAQ episode as well. And I think this one can generate a lot of good questions because just this topic, I think, is kind of a hot box for a lot of martial arts schools.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And for now, keep kicking
for a living.